Well, hello. My name is Angelle Wood, and this is Crime of the Truest Kind. Hey, everybody, let's get the news out of the way right up front. Subscribe to the email list at crimeofthetruestkind.com. I sent the August dispatches out, so for those of you who have subscribed, well, check your spam filter, because I could be sitting in there. For those of you who do get the monthly email newsletter, you know a little bit about what's going on with me. 3 live shows have all been announced and are now all on sale, linked at crimeofthetruestkind.com. So next up, those of you in the southern New Hampshire region, I will be there Thursday night. Thursday, August 21st, 6 o'clock show. It's a very small space. It's called Big Dog Eats, Milford, New Hampshire, off the Oval. Thursday, September 11th, I'm back at Off Cabot in Beverly, Mass. North Shore Unsolved. Tickets are on sale. In the third show, now announced and on sale, Thursday, October 23rd at the Burren, Davis Square in Somerville, Mass. Crimes of Camberville, From the Alleys to the Ivies, a history of crime, unsolved mysteries, and missing people in the Somerville, Cambridge vicinity. Follow at Crime of the Truest Kind on all the socials. Thank you very much. So last episode is part 1. Please go back and listen to that first. Listen with care. It's pretty tough subject matter. Thank you to the patrons on Patreon. I appreciate you quite a lot. I am learning to take more advantage of Patreon and all the many features and functions, so catch me there. Though I do need to give a shout to some of our brand new patrons. Thank you, Emma, Catherine. Thank you, Gretchen, Amy, Sandra, and Sandy. For those of you who are brand new to the show, welcome. This podcast is about Massachusetts and New England crime, history, and always advocacy focused. I believe we have a responsibility with these stories, and we should take very good care of them. This episode is a continuation of my conversation regarding the unsolved cases of the New Bedford Highway murders, going back to 1988 and 1989. If you have not yet, please go back and listen to episode 89, part 1. I talk about the city. I talk about its history and its infamy. I became a lot more interested in New England serial murders after taking a closer look at our history, due in large part to the internet's fascination with the presence of a serial killer in New England this summer. Or, I should rephrase, with the anticipation that one might exist. I spoke with journalist and author and professor Maureen Boyle, author of Shallow Graves, The Hunt for the New Bedford Highway Serial Killer. Maureen spent decades investigating and reporting on the New Bedford Highway murders. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, the foremost authority on this case and its history. This is episode 90, the second part of my conversation with Maureen Boyle. Who is the New Bedford Highway serial killer? New Bedford, Massachusetts. Listed on the Unsolved Cases page on the Bristol County District Attorney's Office website are the 11 women believed to have been murdered by the New Bedford Highway Killer. They were not all sex workers, but they were all vulnerable women in the throes of addiction, all with families who love and miss them. The first discovery, Deborah Medeiros, 30 years old, and considered the killer's first known victim. She was from Fall River and lived there with her mother, and reported missing on May 27, 1988. She did struggle with drugs. Deborah was last seen by her boyfriend in New Bedford after the two had gotten into a fight. Later, he would be ruled out as a suspect in her death. Deborah was found on July 3, 1988, on Interstate 140 in Freetown. She was laying on her back. Her feet were pointed toward the road. She was partially nude with a bra wrapped around her neck. Her cause of death was determined to be strangulation, similar to the other women believed to be victims of the New Bedford Highway Killer. But Deborah would not be identified until months later. This discovery, the first of what would unleash fear and distrust among the communities where 9 women would eventually be found. This was eclipsed that holiday week by a breaking story of a drowning tragedy. Around 10:30 p.m. on July 4th, a 20-foot motorboat loaded beyond its capacity capsized about a mile and a half outside New Bedford Harbor after the fireworks. 11 of those on board that boat would be rescued by passers-by. 2 women and a 1-year-old girl who were aboard that boat drowned. That little baby's 5-year-old brother was missing. The wake of 2 passing boats, one on each side, swamped that boat and caused it to tip over. The victims were identified as Jean Fateau, 49, Maria Carvalho, 27, her 1-year-old daughter, Melissa, and 5-year-old Kenneth Carvalho, Jr., all of North Dartmouth. During the late-night searches, the 5-year-old little boy was not located. He was presumed drowned. And then nearly 1 week after the boating accident, the body of a small child washed up in Fairhaven. It was confirmed to be 5-year-old Kenneth Carvalho, Jr. Now this certainly would make news, as would the death of Deborah Medeiros, once the connections started to be made. The same week that Deborah Medeiros was found, 36-year-old mother of 2, Nancy Paiva, went missing. She would be found a few weeks later, on July 30th, 1988, on 195 West in Westport. It was her boyfriend who reported her missing, and of course, he was looked at as a suspect. The boyfriends always are, but he was ruled out. Deborah Greenlaw DeMello, age 35, was found November 8, 1988, near the on-ramp for the Reed Road exit on 195 in Dartmouth. She disappeared while on work release. She too was the mother of 2 kids. Dawn Mendez, age 25. She was recovered November 29, 1988. She was found by a road crew that were working along I-195 in the same area just 3 days after Deborah DeMello was recovered. Deborah Lynn McConnell, age 25, she was from Newport, Rhode Island. She was discovered by a search dog on December 1st, 1988, off Route 140 in Freetown. Her family had reported her missing 7 months earlier. 28-year-old Rochelle Dopiorala, originally from Falmouth, and disappeared sometime in late April 1988. Rochelle would be found December 10th, 1988, in a gravel pit along Reed Road in Dartmouth. Robin Rhodes, 29 years old. She was found March 28, 1989, along 140, directly across from where Deborah Medeiros was found. Mary Rose Santos, 26. She was found on March 31st, off Route 88, in an area in Westport. Sandra Botello was 24 years old. She is believed to be the last known victim recovered from the New Bedford Highway murders. Sandra was found on April 24, 1989, along I-195 in Marion. 2 women who disappeared right around the same time remain missing. The youngest among the women considered to be victims of this New Bedford Highway Killer was Christina Montero, age 19. Her family had last heard from her in May or June of 1988. She was last seen in July in New Bedford. She has never been seen or heard from again. Marilyn Cardoza Roberts, age 34, last heard from in April 1988. She was believed to be in the New Bedford area at the time. Her father was a retired New Bedford police officer, and her family originally believed she had moved out west to stay with a relative. But once they learned that she hadn't been in touch with any of those relatives, her father reported her missing in June 1988. There was a sighting of Marilyn in New Bedford that same month, so her family thought she was safe. Marilyn Cardoza Roberts was reported missing a second time in December of 1988, after her family learned that there was a possibility of a serial murderer in the area of New Bedford. Both Marilyn and Christina are listed as missing on NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. This is a clearinghouse that acts as an official account of missing people in America. Now, it's not a database of every single missing person in America. I wish it was. Many of these women have connections to one another. Some of them knew each other. There is a substantial pool of suspects and people of interest, one of which is Kenneth Pont, a former addict himself who managed to go to law school and work as a lawyer. He had connections to several of the women, something that got the attention of the investigators. He had represented some of them in court cases, dated another, and at least one of the women stayed in his home, and a local man named Anthony DeGrazia. Women were afraid of him. Women knew him through his violence. And hard to miss, he had a flattened nose from a prior injury. He was called Flat Nose. DeGrazia would be arrested in May 1989 for rapes of several sex workers and held until he posted bond in January of 1990. Kenneth Pont, he had his own history of abuse and run-ins with the law. The heat got a little too close for comfort for Kenneth Pont. He closed his office and moved to Florida in September of 1988, about the time women stopped disappearing from the streets of New Bedford. I will talk in greater detail with author Maureen Boyle coming up. But there is another interesting piece to this unsolved case of serial murder in Massachusetts. There has been speculation, there always is, that the New Bedford serial killer and Europe's Lisbon Ripper may be the same person. This Ripper, a Portuguese serial killer suspected of the killings of sex workers and drug addicts in Portugal, Belgium, Czech Republic, Denmark, the Netherlands. Those murders started about the time the New Bedford killings ended. And New Bedford is known for its Portuguese immigrant community. Do I think the Lisbon Ripper is responsible for the murders in New Bedford? No, I don't. I think that's too easy and too Netflix 5-episode docuseries. You know what I mean? And people are intrigued by the idea of serial killing. They'd be even more intrigued by the idea of a transcontinental serial murderer. Now, I spoke with Maureen Boyle, who was a reporter for the New Bedford Standard Times when these women were being found on the side of the roadways around New Bedford. She covered the cases extensively. Maureen Boyle is an award-winning journalist covering New England crimes for decades. She has been named New England Journalist of the Year 3 times. She's authored 3 books to date: Shallow Graves, The Hunt for the New Bedford Highway Serial Killer, The Ghost, the murder of Police Chief Greg Adams and the hunt for his killer. And Child Last Seen, the search for Patty Desmond. Today, you can find Maureen as the Associate Professor of Communication and Media Studies, Journalism Program Director at Stonehill College here in Massachusetts. The book Shallow Graves is so well done. Next, part 2 of my conversation with Maureen Boyle. I wanted to know more about the suspects and the people of interest in the New Bedford Highway murders, which, sadly, to this day, remain unsolved. With 9 women recovered along the highways in and around New Bedford, and 2 women still missing. Please support crime of the truest kind, and there are a number of ways which you can do that. Subscribe to the show. Follow at Crime of the Truest Kinds on social media. Tell your friends about it. Share it in the Facebook groups, in the subreddits that you post on. Come to a live show. This Thursday, Milford, New Hampshire. Thursday, September 11th, off Cabot in Beverly, Massachusetts. And Thursday, October 23rd, at the Burren in Somerville, Massachusetts. Davis Square on the Red Line. Drop a tip in the jar. You will be giving the dogs a bone. And, well, they could use a little extra love. Become a patron on Patreon. 4 tiers starting at just $1. An added perk, ad-free episodes. Leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And thank you for listening. Let's talk a bit about the 2 people who were suspects or people of interest.
Well, it's a little bit of both. One person was definitely a suspect because he was indicted, and that would be Kenneth Pont. Kenneth Pont was an attorney in the city, and he knew all of the victims. He had, when he was in his late teens, a heroin addiction. He overcame that, eventually became an attorney. He got his record expunged so that he could become an attorney. It was a laudable effort on his part. However, in the 1980s, of course, many of us know that cocaine hit, and there was a number of fallacies out there concerning coke, that it was non-addictive, and obviously it was. He turned to coke and became a cocaine addict, and he turned to the streets, going to his buddies that he knew from his earlier years to buy drugs, so that no one would see him buying the drugs.
While he was still also working as an attorney.
Yes. He wasn't a very good attorney. I'll put it that way. He really was not. He wasn't one of the top, elite attorneys. He was also a deputy sheriff in Bristol County, but he wasn't the way sometimes people who are deputy sheriffs, they're not working full time as deputy sheriffs. He became a deputy sheriff so he could serve papers as a process server. But he also had a badge, so he became a suspect for a number of reasons. He knew all the women. He had a badge that he could flash, and there were stories that he flashed his badge and ripped off drug dealers by claiming to be a cop. So he was quite initially definitely someone of interest. And he moved out of the city around November or so to Florida, and went missing in September. He was not cooperative with the police. Initially they were just wanted to talk to him to see what he knew, to be able to shed light on the women. One of the victims who went missing was a woman who from Cape Cod, who had been living with him also. I mean, there's a reason why he became a suspect early on. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there that the district attorney targeted him for a variety of for personal reasons. That was not the case. He was looked at very strongly by law enforcement for very simple reasons. He knew the victims. He left the area and the killing stopped. And he was not cooperative.
And he represented a few of these women in some minor cases, right?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He also, interestingly, printed out missing persons flyers for Mary Rose Santos, who was one of the missing persons.
Incredible.
And he was also trying to interject himself into the investigation. He would call one of the investigators in the DA's office to find out what's going on or to let them know what he heard. But he really wasn't telling them anything. He was more or less trying to draw out from them what they knew. So that was one of the suspects. The second suspect or person of interest was a man named Anthony DeGrazia. He was from the Freetown Lakeville area. He became a prime focus after one of the girls on the street first identified him as a person who picked her up and immediately grabbed her by the throat and started choking her. They believed all of the victims had died of strangulation. Then other women came forward and identified him because he had a broken nose, and they all referred to him as the boxer, a flat nose.
Which can also have from a lot of cocaine use, we know, right?
Yes. He had a flat nose because his nose had been broken as a young person. Mm-hmm. So he also became a suspect at one point, and he wound up being charged with attacking a number of women in the city, picking them up and choking them to unconsciousness. And then there was a third person who was arrested, Neil Anderson. He was arrested on rape charges after picking up a woman and sexually assaulting her and choking her until she escaped.
And each of these women who survived this clearly identified him with, I mean, he did have some definitely remarkably obvious things. The nose, for example, yes. Somebody who was actively on the streets looking for women for whatever his proclivities were. Obviously, he was an incredibly abusive person. Did anybody come forward from his, I'll say, background? Did anybody come forward to speak about his, because we certainly know that we've learned through the research that people who do go on to become serial killers have quite a number of things in their backgrounds that eventually lead to that. Did you discover any information in his background that could have led to that?
There's a couple of things. He was abused as a child. He was a bedwetter. He was, beaten as a child. He had a very sad and tragic childhood. He later, as an adult, was arrested on rape charges. He picked up 2 teenage girls who were hitchhiking and brought them to a remote location and sexually assaulted them. Or he was accused of sexually assaulting them. He went on trial and he was acquitted on the charges.
Same with Pont, right? He was indicted on one of the murders.
Yes, he was indicted on the murder of Rochelle Dapiala. That's a woman who was living with him. That charge was
romantically involved?
No.
Roommate situation.
Well, she was crashing at his house. I mean, he would always have a lot of coke in the house, and a lot of the girls would come over to the house because they'd party. And he was not. Most of the girls said that he wasn't sexually active with them. All he did was do coke with them. He wound up being indicted on just a single count of murder. And then the district attorney, Ronald Pena, lost the election. New district attorney came in and brought in a special prosecutor to review the evidence to see if there was enough evidence to convict or even to bring the charges before the court. And the prosecutor, who reviewed very carefully all of the evidence, found that there was a lot of innuendo, but there was not enough hard evidence that would lead to a conviction. So as a result, the charges were dropped. It was, without prejudice, so that if they got more evidence, they could still bring charges against him.
And he moved to Florida and eventually passed away.
He moved to Florida, then moved back up here, and then he was continuing to use drugs, and he died alone in his house.
And he was still able to practice law throughout.
No, his law license was pulled.
Thank God.
Yes,
That's some good news out of all of it.
yes. He was not a top lawyer. He was, the not even a run-of-the-mill lawyer.
People weren't seeking him out to defend them. Absolutely not, right?
Oh no, definitely not. Definitely not. Because covered a lot of court cases, and his name never came up as any of the major cases in the city.
So tell me about DeGrazia. He was pretty young when all of this stuff transpired, accused of a number of rapes. He's deceased. How did he go out?
Yeah. When you look at photos of him, he always looked much younger than he was. And I've always, in my mind, always thought of him as being much younger. He was in his early 30s when he died. You might say the walls were closing in on him. He was charged with a number of rapes of women. And then another woman came forward and positively identified him while he was out on bail.
Out on bail.
Based on a truck he was driving. It was a unique name on the side, a business name. And she was able to positively identify him by sight. He tried to sexually assault her in a secluded area in New Bedford, and he was charged again. And at that point, they pulled him back in. Then he was back out on bail. While he was out on bail, he was staying in a rectory in Freetown. People at the parish, some people felt sorry for him based on his background as a child. As a matter of fact, one of the parishioners had helped with his bail. The priest there was counseling him, helped him get on his feet to start a business so that he could have some money and move on. Yeah, he was only supposed to be staying at the rectory just for a brief period of time. And during that period of time, when it was clear, I think it was clear that the district attorney's office was going to take a very hard look at him as a suspect in the case. This was when Kenny Pont's charges were dropped. This is this type of a weekend. It was leaked out that the charges against Kenny Pont were going to be dropped on a Monday, and all the media was being prepared for this. Tony first met with his priest. The priest, of course, said he did not ask for absolution or anything like that. He just wanted to talk with him. Priest was off to someplace else and said, I'll talk to you later. And he went to his ex-girlfriend's house, his ex-fiance's house. She had moved on in her relationships. This was her house and her parents' house. He went into the backyard, took some pills, and died in the backyard there. His body was found the next morning by his ex-fiance's parents. What's interesting about that whole death scene is that usually the parents, the homeowners, would enter the house from the back so that they would have seen him when they got home. But on that particular night, they went in through the front door, so they didn't see him until the next morning.
So even if there was a chance for him to be found and survive, it just wasn't in the cards for him that day, was it?
Exactly. Which, some people speculated that his taking of the pills, and they were pills that were prescribed for him, that it was more of a call for help, that he didn't really mean to kill himself. It didn't work out that way.
Well, and we can also say the heat was coming down. He clearly must have been feeling it. Who knows those conversations he had with the priest? Also, sidebar, I'd be interested to know what his history was with the Catholic Church, given all of the information that we have since learned about the systemic abuse among children, right? That's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother book, Maureen.
The priest that he was seeking counsel from, there is make it clear there was no indication that there was any abuse or anything of a sexual nature between the two of them.
And you're correct, there's no evidence of any abuse between these people that we're talking about right now.
No, not at all. A lot of attention was paid to his childhood and what he endured as a child at home.
Were his parents living into his adulthood?
Yes. His parents had divorced when he was a child, and that's where we found out quite a bit about his childhood and the abuse, because it was documented in divorce paperwork.
Wow. Were there siblings?
Yes. And from what we had learned back then, it seemed that Tony was really the focus of the abuse, not the other children.
It is not uncommon for this kind of behavior to stem from that level of abuse. We've seen it in so many. I've talked about a couple of the better known serial killer cases in our area. You know, Jolly Jane Toppin was a woman who was responsible for the deaths of a number of people. Terrible family life, terrible start to her young life. Not that different from Albert DeSalvo, who had a horrific childhood, abuse from his father. We don't know. Nobody has been convicted in any of these cases. Do you feel like either of these men were directly responsible for this, or do you have a theory based on your research and reporting, that there's somebody else out there that we need to get?
People ask me this question all the time, and my answer every time is, I don't know. I don't think it's fair to say, well, I think it's this person or I think it's that person, because remember, they also have family members that are still living in the area, and it's not fair to them when there is no proof. My feeling is that it's up to law enforcement to identify who the killer is, not for us to speculate on who it might be, because generally we will be wrong. I do believe that once the killer is identified, and to make it clear, I do believe at some point the killer will be identified, whether he's alive or dead. And when they go through the records, they will find that this individual did cross the path of law enforcement at some point during the investigation. For whatever reason, he didn't stand out, or they didn't, I don't want to use the word drop the ball, but they didn't look further into that individual. And they did look at a lot of people. We're talking about two of the suspects, but there were a lot more that they looked into. And I didn't use those names in the book because they were looked at, they weren't charged. And that's not fair to just vomit out names and wreck someone's life. But they looked at a lot of weird people out there. Some individuals in Fairhaven, some individuals out of the area. They looked at someone who was on the Coast Guard. They looked at a dentist, because this particular dentist was doing all the girls' dental work. And they would do him favors, so to speak. There was a number, and there was people in Fall River they looked at, people in Dartmouth, people in Westport, people in Rhode Island. There were a lot more men that law enforcement looked at that time, including individuals who were in motorcycle clubs.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking dozens and dozens of people. There was one individual, and I wrote about it in the book, who confessed to the killings. He was in the Midwest. They brought him back here to drive him through the area. And it turns out that he made the whole thing up because he wanted to see his ex-wife. And he was hoping that they would bring him to her or her to him so he could see her. He never got to see her because once they realized he was making it all up, they shipped him right back to prison in the Midwest. But there's just so many people out there that the general public does not realize had been examined during the course of the investigation. And even to this day, Bristol County DA's office has a cold case unit, state police cold case unit that's assigned to the office. And they are still looking at other cases, other suspects, and re-examining the evidence, because a lot of the things and possible evidence that was gathered at that time could not be forensically examined as well as it can be today.
Amen. This is what's solving these cases. Aside from relationships changing and people feeling, now I can talk, or now I can talk about something that I heard, or now I can tell something that somebody told me, that's helping to solve cases. But the advent of forensic technology, DNA, I really do hope that all of the family members involved have given samples into the databases. That's one thing that myself and some of my own colleagues who are, trying to help, Massachusetts families who are dealing with these kinds of losses, to encourage them to put their DNA in databases, because we know the inevitability of this technology being able to make many more direct connections.
Yes. And there's been some family members, not of the victims, but some family members had been in touch with me saying, they think that, a husband or their father or an uncle or even a brother was involved somehow in the killings. And I do suggest to them to put their DNA into the database, just in case.
And I know it's scary for people. We've heard all of these things about, I don't want my DNA in there. They're going to come after me. Well, they're not going to come after you if you didn't commit a crime. But if you can be instrumental in solving another case, why would you not want to do that?
Especially if you suspect someone in your family is a killer, and you're coming forward saying, I think it could be. And often there are some families who members who have reached out to me who they want me to say, no, there is no way it could have been, their father or their brother or their ex-boyfriend or their ex-husband.
We can't do that. We don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything's possible, and we're certainly not going to name them publicly, but we're not going to say they didn't, right?
Yep.
Well, I really appreciate you walking through this with me. It's certainly very interesting. My heart goes out to the families and those people who are still waiting. These are a lot of years to wait for some answers, particularly the children of these women who have had to live all of these years without their moms, had to live all of these years with people speculating on who their moms were, when they were women trying to survive. They were women who had hope. And because they were in the middle of a struggle with drugs, does not mean that their hopes and dreams were dashed. They weren't given the opportunity. Somebody decided for them that the changes that they were going to make in their lives weren't going to be possible because somebody made the decision for them. That's one of the many things that angers me about cases like this is they're gone. Their cases remain unsolved. Their cases remain, fodder for this true crime space, which I believe we can use the powers of true crime for good, but not everybody does. I would most certainly love to see more light come to these women. Based on my information, the things that I have been reading and the things that I've put together, and certainly your book is one of those amazing resources for this. I believe it's possible that we're going to find out.
Yeah, I agree with you. Some people have said to me that the killer will never be found. And I say it over and over again. No one can get away with murder. And in my heart of hearts, I am convinced this killer will be identified. He may not be alive, but he will be identified. And that's where we'll have more answers. Because as you said, these women deserve their future. And yes, they were in the throes of addiction at the time, but someone took away their hope, their family's hope that they would get clean. And they may have gotten clean. A couple of the women were working to get clean. During that period of time, we have to remember in 1988, there was not the same resources for women seeking drug treatment. Plenty of beds for men, not so many for women. And during that time, I was doing stories about the lack of sufficient drug treatment programs for women. And I would see the women on the phone, on payphones, trying to find a bed someplace. When they were ready to get help, and they said, "Well, call back in 2 weeks." Well, that's not going to help them when they are in the throes of addiction, and they can't just stop, because detoxing from heroin is ugly, and they're not going to die from detoxing, but they will feel like they are dying.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. And it's something that I can't wish on anyone. It's a horrifying way to live, and everybody deserves help. Everybody deserves help. I know that oftentimes people get looked down on. Even I see it with, missing kids. They'll say, "Oh, it's just a runaway." Well, a runaway child, there's a lot of reasons why a child runs away from a home, and they're most vulnerable. We need to find those children before they fall into the grip of sex trafficking. It's extraordinarily sad when this happens to a child, and we need to be even more vigilant. It's hard to imagine all of these years that these women have been gone and their families are like, are we ever going to know?
And some of them have given up hope, but yet there's always this, or they'll say they've given up hope, but there's always that little bit deep inside where, like, maybe, please, please, please give me an answer.
And particularly the two women who are still missing.
And I believe the two women that are still missing, I mean, there's a lot of theories where they might be, because the two women who are still missing, those are the two women who their families had ties to law enforcement. Marilyn Cardoza Roberts, her dad was a retired New Bedford cop. And Christina Montero, her mother was engaged to a Dartmouth cop. And that also brings me to dispelling some of the stories that are out there that police did not care. Or people saying, if this was a cop's kid, they would have been investigating right from the start. Well, there were two victims who have not been found, who are the family had ties to law enforcement. And you can be sure that people on both departments would do anything to be able to give those families answers.
Oh, I believe that. I believe that. Well, thank you. What are you working on next? You must have a new book in the works.
Yes, I'm in the middle of a book involving an abduction. I'm not going to go into great detail. I'm really superstitious about this type of a thing. But it's very involved. It's one of those type of cases. If I knew how much work it would take to get this book done, I don't know if I would have started it. Maybe that's good, because it's a story that really needs to be told. It's a very troubling story. It's a very sad story, but it also shows how resilient families and people in a community can be.
Is it a local case?
Yes, it is. The Massachusetts case.
Well, thank you for the work that you do, because Shallow Graves is the major resource for this case, and to shed light on these women who so often just get grouped up as, they were just prostitutes. No, they weren't. Certainly the language is different now. There's a level of disrespect that always happens in these cases, and it's important that we name them and talk about them, and particularly because they have these children that are just adult children now. It's difficult to grow up without a parent, and it's exceedingly more difficult to grow up when there's so much speculation around who their mothers were.
Yes. And I give the children a lot of credit. Obviously, there were some of the children who fell into addiction, but then there are some of the other children who have succeeded, and their mothers would be so proud to see all that they've accomplished, and all their grandchildren have accomplished.
Yeah, that too. I mean, think of that. How many more family members, children who have been born, and it's incredible. Thank you. We're over an hour. I didn't want to take too much more of your time. And it must be very interesting. I would find it very interesting to talk to students. You work for Stonehill College. It must be very interesting to talk to the younger generations about all of these sorts of things, and just in the scape of how media has changed over time. It must be really interesting.
It is. I learn as much from the students as they learn from me. And I always ask them, well, how do you get your news? And I am finding more and more over the years that they are not getting their news from what I consider legitimate news sources. I do not like the term mainstream media and using it as a derogatory term. I'm saying that this is what they're calling quote unquote mainstream media. It is media that there are checks and balances generally before a story is published. The reason why what you see on the internet isn't in quote unquote mainstream media is because it cannot be verified.
Free for all.
And yeah, you can lie on the internet, but you really can't lie in a network television broadcast or a local broadcast or in legacy media because you're going to get sued. And your editor is not going to allow certain types of pieces to speculative pieces to go out there.
Absolutely right. Then it becomes an editorial. And
yes,
that doesn't always fly.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can see an editorial that's like, this is my opinion. There's only so much of your opinion that you can put in print.
Yeah, well, that's what I say to my students all the time. I respect your opinion, but I don't care what it is. And I better not see what your opinion is when you're writing a news story or a news feature. It has to be objective. I should not know what your opinion is. And so, well, that's my opinion. And, what about, and I was like, I don't care.
It's not part of the story. You're right. I recognize that, folks scroll through TikTok and people who are looked at sometimes as legitimate, as we say, to some of these folks, they're just saying whatever they want. They can say whatever they want, and you can return to see what they're spewing about. But you're right. That's what some of this the exploitative nature of true crime, for example, comes from, is just people saying, what do you think happens?
Yeah.
It's really harmful.
Yeah, it is. And, to give proper credit to some of the Facebook pages, true crime Facebook pages, there are some very good moderators and administrators out there who really try to rein people in without stifling discussion. And then there's some that they're just out there.
And we've seen that, circling back to the very beginning of this conversation about, is there a serial killer loose in New England right now? Well, you know what? You can go on various Facebook places, various Facebook groups, and Reddit is one of those places where it's good, bad, and ugly. People can just say, I think.
Exactly. And I think that there are some people who are disappointed that there isn't a serial killer, and they keep on trying to rejuvenate discussion on it. And you want to say, no, no, no. When you were working in New Hampshire, and I used to work in New Hampshire when I was right out of college, I was working in the greater Nashua area. And every spring and every hunting season, bodies would be found in the woods. Was it a serial killer? No. I mean, the bodies would be found so often that you could just put in different days, different times, different towns, but it would always be a hunter walking through whatever road in whatever town, stumbled upon the skeletal remains of a human. The AJ's office would not say if it was a man, a woman, clothed, unclothed. You'd go through the whole list. But it happens all the time. People commit suicide. They die of natural causes. And there are some cases where it's a murder. But in most cases, it's the first.
That's one of the things that when I spoke with Bob Ward on Boston 25 News was, he posed that. What do you think of the speculation? And my response was, people are really excited about the prospect of there being a serial killer because of just the nature of the interest in true crime. We saw it with that, I'm not going to name it, but that very high profile case that just wrapped up in our area very recently. Folks were just frothing at the mouth for this information.
And now that high profile case that we're not going to mention, now that that is over, it's like there's a whole group of people are still trying to keep discussing it, and it's over with, it's done with, but they're still relitigating it and poking holes at and bringing individual stories and criticizing witnesses and making fun of judges. You see this and you want to say, the case is over, go back to your lives. I understand that you spent a lot of time on this, but no, it's done.
I would really like to see people who have such a level of interest. And if it's justice you are after, because I question what they're after, we should all have justice in mind for these individuals. You should want to, if you're going to spend this kind of time, if you're going to dedicate this kind of time on cases, unsolved cases, man, there are a lot of cases that really need that kind of dedication and that kind of vigilance. But I wonder if all of that effort that has been spent on the case that won't be named, will that help anybody else down the road? I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's wonderful to talk to you. I could take up your whole afternoon. I'd love to revisit other conversations about all the other cases that you've been covering, these conversations about the real story.
Yeah, I have two books that I wrote after this, and both of them were solved because someone came forward.
Thank you, Maureen Boyle, for your reporting and your writing. I'm very interested in knowing what her new book is about. You can get Maureen's book, Shallow Graves, The Hunt for the New Bedford Serial Killer, everywhere books are sold. I've linked everything on the episode page at Crime of the Truest Kind. You can read more about the case, the cases, 11 of them still unsolved, 2 women still missing. It's incredibly sad for families to languish like this. Thank you for listening. My name is Angel Wood. This is Crime of the Truest Kind. Massachusetts and New England crime stories, history, and advocacy. It's important to tell these stories in a way that is respectful, that keeps the memory of these people alive. These people have families, sons, daughters, cousins, aunts, uncles, parents. So many years have passed. Some of those parents aren't with us any longer. Everything about the show online, crimeofthetruestkind.com. Follow the show at Crime of the Truest Kind on the social spots. Subscribe to the show. Tell people about it. Share cases. You can email me, crimeofthetruestkind@gmail.com. I have 3 live shows coming up this Thursday, August 21st in Milford, New Hampshire. Thursday, September 11th at Off Cabot in Beverly, Mass. Doing Unsolved North Shore. Send me cases. Send me some New Hampshire cases. And then in October 23rd, I am at the Burren in Somerville. Please come. Tickets available now. Thank you to my solid group of patrons on Patreon. I'm going to do a live stream coming up in October for the anniversary. I have a lot of people to thank for your contributions. Emma, Gretchen, Amy, Sandy, Catherine, Danielle, Georgia, Holly, Lolo, Michelle with 1 L, Amy, Courtney, Pam K, Brandy, Mark with a C, Rebecca, Sandy with an I, and my life partner, my favorite Gaylord, Lisa McColgan, my superstar EP. There's a story to that, none of which I'm going to get into. I'll see you in 2 weeks if I don't see you at the New Hampshire show. Otis says hi. Send him all the love that you can. And lock your goddamn doors.